So we have Dylan here joining us from ID Technologies, and what we hope for is for Dylan to use his 18 years of federal government experience to give us a little bit of an industry perspective. We've been lucky enough to have quite a few government leaders here join us and talk about some of the challenges they have and some of the opportunities they do in IT modernization and cybersecurity. But what we're hoping to is, based on the experience that Dylan has here, is to talk a little bit about some of the what he's seen from the industry perspective, from working from the outside of government and seeing what we have going on there. So Dylan actually challenged me to. He said he wanted this to be a challenging the status quo. He didn't want the typical softballs thrown out there, so we're gonna do a few of those here. I also wanted
Careful
to mention,
what I wish for, right?
Absolutely. I also wanted to mention Dylan is a lifelong Texas Longhorns fan. So congratulations to your team.
Thank
you had a bit of a hiccup against my alma mater in the beginning, but we'll take that. Moving along. Hit a sore spot there. So the federal CIO, Suzette Kent, testified before Congress that the technology talent gap is one of the greatest challenges facing government. What does the government need to do to avoid brain drain?
Wow, so we start off with some trash talk about my football team and then go straight to the top. I can appreciate that. Well, so I think that the technology, I think that the brain drain conversation, I think that it's a multifaceted problem for government. I think you see issues in direct hiring authorities. I think you see issues in a lot of different arenas. But sitting on the other side and being the fortunate recipient, a lot of the talent that our taxpayers paid to develop, the number one reason I see people leaving is frustration. They didn't have the expectation. They didn't have their expectations set properly when they got in. They expected to be part of cooler things. But mostly it's just the process. It's just the fact that it's the biggest bureaucracy in the world, and some people can't cut through that. But the comments from the panel members before me and Governor Rich before them really give me a lot of hope. You hear terms like agile and iterative and start small, get big, find success where you can. That's what the private industry does. That's how we address that. So I think from the people side, I think that it's going to be key to hone in on processes that are as close to private industry, not necessarily product development from let's sell a product, but what the private industry is doing internally. So if you look at what Google does internally or what Facebook does internally to support their mission, it is not necessarily the product they're selling you, right, or me as a user. Their internal processes are very well developed. Failure is always an option. There is no CYA. CYA is not tolerated. And I think that creating a culture where the definitions of success are not meeting a deadline, they're not necessarily related to these kind of intangible factors that are built into a process beforehand. I think the other side of that problem for brain drain is knowledge management. And I think that what really happens in these organizations is you'll find a nexus of 3 or 4 or sometimes 50 people that know where all the people are, all the systems are, all the data is. And when they go to private sector, a lot of times they get picked up by the agency as a contractor because, well, you can't afford to lose that person, or that's the perception. So I think that knowledge management kind of hit a high point mid-2000s. It was really exciting. I think that the development, then it trailed off. But I think the development of AI and machine learning and the ability to interact with systems in a way that's more natural for an organization to be able to go to its systems and interrogate them with a question like, hey, how am I adhering to the risk management framework in this program, and be able to get a meaningful answer? Those types of capabilities are real, and I think that that's another way that government agencies can start to address this problem.
ID Technologies does a lot of great work with national security and some of the classified programs out there. Does commercial solutions for classified do enough to leverage industry innovation to deliver IA solutions quickly enough to government?
So I think that the NSA CSFC program office is one of the most innovative approaches to cyber I've seen in a long time. They essentially said, hey, industry, here's a set of ways you can put together stuff you're already doing in a way that makes it suitable for classified information over untrusted networks or environments. Really, the failure has been on industry. We haven't done enough from an industry perspective to productize this. We haven't done enough to automate this and make it easier to consume. I think that industry in general is kind of sitting back and taking I'll call it an older school approach, where they're waiting for an RFI or an RFP, and they want to put 50 or 100 people on a program to develop a capability, instead of saying, hey, the government has already identified requirements. They've already told us this is what they need. Why aren't we building this?
So earlier today, DHS Undersecretary Krebs talked a little bit about risk management and the work that they're doing right there to kind of change the discussion there. What can the government agencies do to take more responsibility but less risk?
So I think that's a great question, right? And it's one that has a lot of answers, and I'm probably going to put my foot wrong here, so if I offend anybody, I apologize. But I think it has to do with redefining risk and responsibility. When I see RFPs and RFIs coming out from the government, especially along systems that should be incredibly standardized, incredibly simple, really boring systems, really, that's the word I like to use. It's not sexy. The government is still hesitant to take on requirements in terms of framework or approach. They want to leave the requirements as open as possible, so in case there's a failure, it is the vendor or the integrator's responsibility to address that issue. But the net result of that is the fact that the government gets something that's not adhering to any standards, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, who's left holding the bag, right? You don't see industry stepping up to say, you know what, you're right, I'm going to give you all your money back. We didn't do that right. Here's your money back for the program that we didn't deliver. I can tell you, I've been part of both sides of those programs. And the ones that worked had strong government leadership with IT people that understood both the technology and the implication of the technology for the government. And the ones that didn't had people that were concerned with covering their assets, so to speak, and making sure that any failure was directed anywhere but that program. And that type of approach never works in IT. There's never a way to blame your way out of a problem. There's never a way to buy your way out of a problem. And I think one of the gentlemen on the panel before mentioned unicorn cyber money, and I know it does come, and I know it's critical, and it helps agencies address issues that otherwise they don't have the funding to address, but it has to be delivered in the right way. When you come to a program that wasn't expecting money and say, hey, here's $50 million to address your cyber problem, what do? They call the guy they know that knows cybersecurity, and they say, hey, man, I got $50 million, or hey, lady, I got $50 million, what should I do? And they say, well, you should buy this new IDS IDVP product. I've got some really cool malware prevention stuff that does zero-day detection and exploitation. And just send me a PO and that'll fix your problem. And so that unicorn cyber money does not get deployed in a way that's actually meaningful for the government. I was part of an exploit, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I was part of the remediation for an exploit at a major agency about 10 years ago, and the response was buy all new desktops. Right? We've been exploited. We should buy all new desktops. And it's like, that's not the answer. Right? And they got money from Congress to do that. And they bought 80,000 new desktops and deployed them over the next year. And at the end of it, they hadn't done one thing to put a better foot forward from a cyber posture. And configuration management's really important, right? It's one of those things that was mentioned earlier as one of the basic things you have to do, but you can't buy your way out of a configuration management problem. And so when you talk about responsibility and risk, I think unfortunately, as thankless as the job can be, and thank you for your service, civilian or DoD, as thankless as it could be, you do have to be willing to take on responsibility and say, I own the outcome for every IT project that I put out there. And when you do that, and you focus on retaining talent, and you have people on the programs that understand what you're trying to do in your mission, you're going to have a better outcome. And I think that industry, all of us, including my company, which I think we do a good job, needs to be less reactive to this unicorn funding and more proactive in putting even unsolicited proposals in front of the government. If you get money, here's what you should do, and it should have an outcome that looks like this. And if it doesn't, we failed. So I think that's the approach that industry needs to take in partnership with government. Of the $87 billion in government IT that goes out there, 40% of it doesn't get deployed. I guarantee you the lion's share of that 40% goes to industry. It's not being spent on people who work with the government. And so I think it's on us to have a better return on investment from our government partners.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think that's all the time we have, but thank you very much, Dylan,
no problem.
For the time. And thank you for ID Technologies and the support and making today possible. So thank you very much.